What's up, y'all? This is DJ Kenny Parker, DJ and producer for Boogie Down Productions / KRS-One, and today I'm back with another story. First, let me show y'all this I dug out of storage. This is a BDP African medallion. Do y'all remember when people used to rock the old African medallions back in the day? I just found this BDP one. I thought it was pretty funny. I think De La Soul had the best ones. Well, the reason I pulled this one out today is because the theme of today's video is the members of Boogie Down Productions. First, I'd like to thank all the people who have watched the video so far, who've enjoyed the content, who've left comments. I try to read all the comments for the most part. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people have been asking me about who are the members of BDP? Who are these names that we've heard on the records over the years? Can you do like a little breakdown of who these people are? So today, I'm going to get into who was who in BDP. Now, of course, I'm probably going to forget some names. If I forget your name and don't mention you, allow me to apologize in advance. I got a lot of names to get to. I'm going to try to do the names that people know the most. Over the years, quite a few people have come in and out of the group Boogie Down Productions. Some were only down for a little while. Some kind of faded off after a while. Many left to pursue solo careers or pursue other endeavors. And some people's departure from the crew was mutually agreed upon by both parties. Let's also be clear that the only person who could say who was in or out of Boogie Down Productions BDP was KRS-One. Okay, let's begin. First, let's start with the two main principals, DJ Scott LaRocque and KRS-One. DJ Scott LaRocque was the DJ of Boogie Down Productions, the producer of Boogie Down Productions, the co-founder of Boogie Down Productions, and he handled most of the business. He was the leader of the group. Of course, you had KRS-One, co-founder of Boogie Down Productions, producer for Boogie Down Productions, and the person who wrote 99.9% of all the lyrics of Boogie Down Productions. Now, BDP was really split into two factions that actually came together. Scott LaRocque and his crew, and KRS-One and his crew made BDP. Let's start with Scott LaRocque. The number one person that Scott LaRocque added to Boogie Down Productions was, of course, the third member of the group, D-Nice. D-Nice and Scott LaRocque had almost a father and son relationship. Scott LaRocque took D-Nice under his wing. In the history of BDP, D-Nice was probably the most versatile member of the group. At any given time, he was an MC, a beatbox, a sideman, a DJ, a producer, and part-time comedian. I got a few funny stories with D-Nice. Maybe I'll share those another time. Let's move on. There were other people who were members of the crew that hadn't been mentioned yet during the making of the Criminal Minded album, but they were around. I'll get to them in a second. Then you had what I would call BDP affiliates. They weren't exactly in Boogie Down Productions, but they were part of the inner circle and did a lot of work for the crew. First off, you'd have Said G of the Ultramagnetic MCs, one of my favorite groups. At one point, before they both dropped their debut singles, I've heard Chris mention that Ultramagnetic and BDP were almost practically the same crew. They were that close. They worked together, they hung together, and as we all know, Said G did a lot of production and co-production on Boogie Down Productions' Criminal Minded album. Also, around the time of the making of the Criminal Minded album, you also had BDP affiliate Cool DJ Red Alert. of 98.7 KISS FM. As we know, DJ Red Alert is a pioneer in the history of hip-hop radio. Red Alert was the first person to play South Bronx by Boogie Down Productions, and he was the first person to play The Bridge Is Over by Boogie Down Productions. As a matter of fact, Red Alert was probably the first to play dozens of classic records from the 80s and 90s that we all love. Shout out to Red Alert, the legend. Now that cast of people, as I understand it, was brought into the fold by DJ Scott LaRocque. On the KRS-One side of things was his ex-wife and Brooklyn MC, Miss Melody. As some of you may know, Miss Melody went on to record her own album, Diva. What a lot of people might not know was Miss Melody is the one singing Scott LaRocque had 'em all. He is the super ho on the Criminal Minded album. A little trivia. Also in the KRS-One camp is a guy named ICU. As I mentioned in my book, my brother's name is Kenny. For those of you that haven't picked it up, I'll put a link in the description below. I talk about ICU as one of KRS-One's closest friends, and they go back to his teenage years. ICU and Chris were like this, and he was around for the whole BDP run. Shout to ICU. Now, those were the main characters that were mentioned in the Criminal Minded album. As I mentioned, with each album, some members were added, some members were subtracted. Now we get into the By All Means Necessary album, Boogie Down Productions' second album. After the passing of Scott LaRocque, KRS-One became the undisputed leader of the group, as he should be. He then began mentioning more people in the Boogie Down production crew. On the inner sleeve of the album, there is a picture which introduces most of the members of Boogie Down Productions. As you can see, there's 7 guys in the picture. Let me break down who they are. In the song I'm Still Number One of the By All Means Necessary album, Chris goes through a little roll call of all the people that's down with us. In the picture, you have Manager Mo. Shout out to Manager Mo, whose real name is Scotty. He was simply that, the manager of Boogie Down Productions. He was the manager of BDP since the Criminal Minded album, but he finally got his proper shout out on the By All Means Necessary album. Then you have RoboCop. Now there was 2 RoboCops. The first RoboCop was a guy who did security at the famous nightclub, the Latin Quarters. He was a big guy, about 6'7", and he traveled with BDP. I only met him a few times, but he was pretty cool. But he had a pretty violent reputation in the streets. After the Criminal Minded album, he was replaced in the group by a new RoboCop. The RoboCop that Chris shouts out on I'm Still Number One. This RoboCop, who was also a state trooper, did some security with BDP. As a matter of fact, he's the one that's shown on the cover of the Ghetto Music album, standing over KRS-One as he sits on the stoop. Little trivia there. Also in the picture, you have cool DJ Red Alert once again, who is now an official member of BDP. He's also featured on the song Jimmy. Also in the picture is D Nice, of course, who replaced Scott LaRocque as the DJ of BDP. In the middle of the picture, you have Mick Boo. Shout out to Mick Boo. That's D Nice's cousin, and he later became D Nice's DJ when D Nice went solo. I assume at this time, Mick Boo was being groomed to work with D Nice later on, but he was with BDP the whole time at every show, every studio session. He was a valuable member at the time. Also around the time of the By All Means Necessary album, 1988, there were some BDP affiliates who were not in the picture, but were mentioned on the song I'm Still Number One. First you have DJ Doc, who's down with us.
You ready, Doc? By the way, before I start this is my engineer, Doc. He did the Criminal-Minded Engineering, and he's doing my new album, By All Means Necessary Engineering, and this is one of the cuts on him. Hit it!
DJ Doc was a super talented engineer who worked on the Criminal-Minded album and the By All Means Necessary album. He went on to work with Biz Markie, EPMD, MC Light, the list goes on. He was a superstar engineer at Power Play Studios and very well sought after. Of course, you have Just Ice and his beatbox DMX. We all know him from the club banger LaToya and from his work with KRS-One on Going Way Back. And my favorite collaboration of theirs, Mash It Up.
Suicide, it's a suicide. Suicide, it's a suicide.
There was a guy mentioned in I'm Still Number One named Castle D. Now, honestly, I'm not sure what Castle D's story was. I know he was an MC. I know he was down with Chris and Scott from the early days. But unfortunately, he was incarcerated when BDP finally broke through. I met him a few years later, so I can't really speak on Castle D, but shout out to him anyway. Finally, you have Keyboard Money Mike. Now, once again, I'm not sure what Keyboard Money Mike did with Boogie Down Productions, but I do know he worked very closely with Said G of the Ultramagnetic MCs. As a matter of fact, I saw an interview with Keyboard Money Mike where he said he was very instrumental in producing Ego Trippin' for the Ultramagnetic MCs. Shout out to Keyboard Money Mike. The following year was 1989, and Boogie Down Productions released Ghetto Music, the Blueprint of Hip Hop. And once again, there was a lineup change in BDP. The Ghetto Music album once again had a picture in the liner notes, but as you can see, some of the members were still there and some were different. In the picture, you see some of the usual suspects: Miss Melody, Mick Boo, KRS-One, RoboCop, Manager Mo, and of course D-Nice. However, in the back row were some new people. A guy named Sha, an MC out of Brooklyn who Chris was working with on a solo project, is in the picture. Also, a guy named Sidney Mills is in the picture. He is a talented musician from the reggae group Steel Pulse, and he also did some co-production on the Ghetto Music album. Seated next to him in the middle is a woman named Rebecca Forster, one of my favorite people in the world. Rebecca Forster is a world-renowned sound engineer who has worked with Boogie Down Productions, Naughty by Nature, A Tribe Called Quest, Queen Latifah, Lauryn Hill, the list goes on and on. She is very well respected in the business. Currently, she's working with D-Nice on his Club Quarantine tour. Shout out to Rebecca Forster. I love you. Seated next to Rebecca Forster is a guy named D-Square, who's down with us. Seen here in the Love's Gonna Get You video, D-Square is a recording engineer who replaced DJ Doc as the lead engineer for Boogie Down Productions. Finally, seated next to D-Square is a guy named Willie D. Willie D is the longest lasting Boogie Down Productions member. He was down since day one and one of the most important members of BDP. Willie D was the backbone of Boogie Down Productions. Before BDP, Willie D was president of Chapter 5 of the Zulu Nation. Willie D performed with BDP from 1988 well into the 2000s. If you saw a BDP show during that time, you saw Willie D on stage. Also, Willie D was known as a very tough street guy from the Bronx. In every BDP beef and disagreement, and there were many, Willie D was right in the center of the action. I'm going to get more into Willie D in future stories because he was very instrumental in a lot of the incidents that happened with BDP. Unfortunately, my man Willie D passed away in 2020. Rest in peace, Willie D. I love you and I miss you. Not long after the picture was taken in the inner sleeve of the Ghetto Music album, I joined the group. I started off assisting Rebecca Foster, but I soon became the new DJ of Boogie Down Productions right after D Nice left and during the making of the Edutainment album. Edutainment was released in 1990, and once again, there was a lineup change. At this point, Boogie Down Productions was at its biggest. There were still some members that were down from before. There were BDP affiliates still floating around, and some new members were added. First was an R&B singer and sister of Miss Melody named Harmony. She first appeared on the Ghetto Music album, but by 1990, she was an official member of BDP. She would later go on to release her debut album a year later. Also, you have a female MC out of New Jersey named Heather B, who was my friend from college. Heather B went on to star on MTV's The Real World, released 2 albums, and now she is the co-host of Sway in the Morning on Sirius XM. Shout out to my girl Heather B. Finally, you have the reggae/hip hop artist Jamal Ski. In 1992, Boogie Down Productions released their final album, Sex and Violence. And by this time, a lot had changed. The Boogie Down Productions crew was down to 3 members: KRS-One, Kenny Parker, and Willie D. That's it. After the Sex and Violence album, Boogie Down Productions was no more. From that point on, all projects were now being called KRS-One. There was no longer a Boogie Down Productions crew. Now you had just the BDP crew, which was a little different. Here I am rocking my BDP crew shirt from that time period. This particular shirt has to be 28 years old. The BDP crew consisted basically of 3 groups. Channel Live, shout out to Hakeem Green and Tuffy, reggae artist Mad Lion, and the MC Supernatural. Shout out to my man Supernatural, who I consider the best freestyler I've ever seen in my life. After that era, somewhere between 93, 94, and about 96, 97, there were no more BDP crew members. After that, the Temple of Hip Hop organization was founded, and everybody affiliated with KRS-One was affiliated through the Temple of Hip Hop. There are so many members in the Temple of Hip Hop, we'd be here all day if I tried to break that down. Anyway, there you have it, the members of Boogie Down Productions as best I can recall. I hope I didn't leave anybody out that you guys wanted to hear about. If I did, leave a comment. I'll try to speak about them later on. And once again, thanks for watching. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Pick up the book. My brother's name is Kenny. And I'm out.